right, welcome to the final EmpowerMEN podcast for the year. Raph, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Feeling exhausted after a big year, but it's all good that things are moving and everything's going well.
Mate, it's been a massive year, and I know you're massively busy coming up to the end of the year, so it'd be nice to put your feet up over Christmas for a week or two.
Certainly will.
Well, we're ending the year on a massive note. Our guest tonight, every week he interviews me on Light FM, so I decided it's time to turn the tables and it's time to put him under the pump and ask him all the questions. So, Cal McWilliam from Light FM, welcome. How you going, mate?
Very smooth, Colin. I like the way you could be having my job next year.
Oh, well, you know, all the pressure's off me now, so now it's all about you.
I know you're running the ship now. I just get to sit back and answer all the questions.
And here's Lucy. No.
No, that's it. It's weird, isn't it? It's just me by myself. The far less interesting half of Lucy and Kel for breakfast.
Oh, not at all. Well, we got a lot of stuff to chat through tonight, so
yeah, we're doing something that I don't really enjoy doing, which is talking about myself, which is weird because of my job, I know, but yeah, normally I can deflect and say something funny and not get too emotional, but I don't know where you'll have me by the end of this.
Or go to the ad break, you know.
We'll play a Justin Bieber song. Yeah.
Is Justin Bieber allowed on the Light?
Yeah. Justin's got a few good things to sing about.
We've got lots of stuff to cover tonight. So I thought we'd start off with a little bit of your background, and you know, you left school at a youngish age for what we would think today.
Well, leaving school, it wasn't really by my choice. It was my decision-making process that got me to leave school in the end. But yes, no, I think I achieved the first term of year 12, and that was it for me. I was a young man enjoying a lot of the world that is on offer to a young man at that age. I think about 16 or 17. Friends were hugely influential in my life. I was all about my friends. And there was a lot of distractions. And I was a pretty good student up until about year 10. And that was going well. But by about year 11, I really started to, I think at that time, especially in a young adult, a teenager's young adult life, you're kind of just focused on yourself. You're kind of focused on feeling good.
Yeah.
All of the time. That involved a lot of drinking at an incredibly young age, which I obviously don't recommend, but it was something that I was going through. And yeah, the interest in school started to wane a little bit. The problem was that I didn't tell my mum or my dad that my interest in school was waning. So mum would ask, how am I going? And she's a school teacher. So
wow.
I used to tell mum, oh, everything's fine. I'm doing all my projects. I'm getting all my work in. I'm really flying. The teachers are loving everything. And because the teenage boy's brain at about 16 or 17 isn't fully developed, I didn't think about the end game and the report card that would come at the end of the first term. And of course, the report card came and it was NA. Kel hasn't finished anything. Kel doesn't turn up to classes. And of course, this was a big surprise to my mum and dad because all I told them was everything was going great.
Yeah.
And mum, I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say mum cried for about 3 days straight.
Yeah.
And I think, to quote my father, it was something along the lines of, well, I'm not working my guts out to send you to a school you don't want to go to. So you're coming to work with me on Monday. So I ended up working with my dad the weekend after the weekend after school wasn't a part of my life anymore. And dad was a builder renovator. So I started digging lots of trenches and stump holes and moving bricks around and mixing cement. And
at what point in that process did you think, hang on a minute, I've made a mistake, I need to go back to school?
This is the thing. At the very beginning, I thought, this is fantastic. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to get muscles and I'm going to get really fit and dad's going to pay me But yeah, after about the third or fourth week of digging trenches, the shine wears off that pretty quickly. So my dad was great. I mean, obviously my mum and dad had a decision to make based on the fact that I hadn't made some great decisions at that point. And I think they knew that school probably wasn't my focus, and I probably left my run too late in that regard, and that maybe I could do better, maybe having something. Obviously, they didn't want to have a moment where I sort of sat on the couch for a year and twiddled my thumbs. So Dad was like, "You're coming to work. You're not going to stop. You're not going to slow down. This is the decision you made. So here's life, and off you go."
So how did the following few years pan out? Like, did you stay?
It didn't pan out for a year, or I think it was less than a year. And Mum intervened, I think, at some point, and I think she could see that I'm still very young. And still not sure about what I'm supposed to do in life. And I know with my kids now, I've got teenage kids, and I always say, don't worry if you don't know what you're doing in life. I know some really great adults that have still no idea what they're doing in life. So Mum took me aside at one point. She said, "Look, if you want to be a builder or a chippy or a sparky, then double down and go get your apprenticeship and go do it properly. Don't just work with Dad. But if you don't want to do that, make a decision. What do you want to do with your life?" And historically at school, for some reason, people thought my voice was really, really good for radio. And I'd be at school occasionally and everyone would come up and go, "Hey, Kel, how's everything going?" And they'd make fun of the sound of my voice. And I had a friend who was working at a community radio station back in the olden days when I was doing radio for the first time. There was community broadcasting, and community radio stations would be vying for a broadcasting license. So they would broadcast for 6 to 8 weeks, and you'd be able to listen on one frequency. You could listen to a different radio station every 6 to 8 weeks. And I happened to be friends with a girl who was working in a radio station that was completely run by kids. So it was just youth radio. And I don't think anyone there, from whether they were on the air or behind the scenes or working at board level, was any older than 2021. So, and most of us were about 16, 17. And I just started hanging out with my friend, and she was there working at the station. And then all of a sudden I sort of was hanging out there every day because it was fun, and we were eating pizza and playing all our favorite music. And then I somehow managed to get myself a job and started doing morning radio on this kids radio station that would broadcast, 6 to 8 weeks every half a year for a couple of years. So that's how I got into radio, I think. And that was a lot of fun at the time because we weren't getting paid to do it, and we were really excited. We thought we were really cool and playing all our favorite songs and hanging out, and it was really good.
And did that make your mum happy that you were thinking about choosing that path?
I think she was happy that I was actually focused on something. I was passionate about something again, and not necessarily just focused on hanging out with friends or when is the weekend coming around, or because again, at that age you can be quite in the moment as a young teenage boy, and you can be very, very, very much about yourself, which I was. It was just about me. Yeah. But I'm sure Mum, being the wonderful mum that she was, she knew there was a good kid in there somewhere, and she'd installed most of the operating software in there somewhere, and it just had to boot up. So once I got focused on doing radio and enjoying what I did, and I was by no means was I any good. I was terrible. I mean, if you heard a tape from me doing Hits FM back in the 90s, I mean, there's no way you would say that guy's going to be doing radio for the rest of his life.
But look at you.
It was just something that I loved, and I think you see that in a lot of kids. If they find something, there's some kids that just click into stuff early on, and you just know that that's what they want to do in life, and then there are other kids that, much like me up until that point, had no idea what they were doing. All I wanted to do was have fun, and that can be quite destructive for especially young guys. That's why sometimes having a sport that they play is good, or having a job, a part-time job. I used to work at, this is how old I am, I said this to Colin this morning at the gym, I used to work at Safeway. Most kids these days don't even know what a Safeway was, but just having some sort of focus really set me back on track. So I think that's what Mum knew I needed in life.
So sort of fast forward a little bit, like you stayed in radio.
We stayed in radio for. I was doing the community radio station, but one of the things from this particular community radio station, it was run by kids. So every time it would broadcast, its test broadcast for a couple of weeks, all the kids listening to like the commercial radio stations at night time would stop listening at night time and listen to us. And the commercial radio stations started to see this in the ratings, and they would notice that every time we broadcast for a couple of weeks, all the kids disappeared. And because they weren't at the time playing any of the 90s dance music that we were playing, but we were kids making radio for kids our age. Yeah. So we loved it. And then surprisingly, a lot of us got job offers to go and work in commercial radio. I think they wanted to sort of destroy us from the inside, and they all said, hey, if you love radio, would you like to get paid to do it? And we thought, yay. So then I ended up working in a massive commercial radio organisation that has stations right around the country. And I think at the age of 17 or 18, I got a job offer to work in Brisbane in commercial radio at the House of Rock, we'll refer to it as. And I remember I was still, as I said, I was at that age. I was a teenage boy, 17, 18. I'd worked everything out. I knew everything, and I knew how the world worked, and I knew that I'd arrived. And of course, I knew nothing in hindsight. But at the time, I was really confident. And I said to my dad, and I can remember a conversation I had with my dad in the backyard. And I said, Dad, I got this opportunity to go and get a job in Queensland, but I'd have to move and go there by myself. And I think my dad knew at the time, because his one word response was, yes, go do it. Go, leave.
Yeah.
Because I was a teenage boy. I was out with my mates a lot. I wasn't the best older brother at the time. I have a really good relationship with my sisters now, but I'm the eldest of 3 kids, 2 sisters. And of course, the middle sister and I had a bit of a sibling rivalry going on, and I wasn't the nicest big brother. And I think Dad was just like, this kid needs to get out, and he has to learn that life is hard work. You've got to work, you've got to pay bills, you've got to have a roof over your head, you've got to feed yourself. And I knew none of that, and this was a perfect opportunity. So then I started a career in commercial radio that lasted about 7 years.
Wow.
7 years. Awesome. And did you enjoy that?
I love working in commercial radio, and at the very same time did not enjoy it towards the end. Commercial radio at the time that I was working in it, it was as if you were doing the most important job in the history of employment. Like doing radio for us, it was ingrained into us that we were changing the world with every cultural song. And it's not until you get outside of the bubble that you realize you're just in radio. But I did 7 years of radio, and I really met some amazing people, but there are also some not so amazing people. The culture at the time, and I'm sure it's changed now, or I hope it's changed, is very get ahead any way that you can, climb the ladder, get the next person's job, prove your worth. We were always told back in those days, there's somebody waiting to take your job and do it for half the money that we're paying you right now. So you better do it. So subsequently, I worked for 7 years. I said yes to everything. I moved Queensland, Melbourne, New South Wales, Perth, back to Melbourne, said yes to everything. Never took a holiday, because anyone that took holidays back in those days didn't come back from holidays. Somebody else did their job, and they go, oh, you can do his job and your job. That's fine. That's the way we'll work.
So did you feel like you almost had to be fake in terms of like, I've got to put on the best show that I can?
There was a lot of, how do I put this? There's a lot of alpha attitudes when I was working there. And again, this is decades ago. I'm sure it's a much healthier workspace, and it was a great workspace then. It was really, I thought I was the most exciting place. I was doing the radio that I wanted to do. I wasn't doing any massive shows. I wasn't a Hamish or Andy or anything, but I was working with some amazing people behind the scenes. I was paneling shows. I was doing weekends. But there was always that drive, that fear. There was a lot of fear-based. Got to do it well. If you don't do it well, someone else will do it. If you complain, or if you take some time off, if you if you show any weakness, there was a huge way of thought back in those days. There was the book called The Art of War. I don't know. I've never read it myself, but almost every manager in commercial radio had this book called The Art of War, and that's really how they thought about what they were doing. They were in it to win, and they would win at all costs. So that's the sort of mentality. And after 7 years of that, I had burnt myself out. I don't think I'd been outside for 7 years. I was just working inside on radio nonstop.
So what?
But again, it was still, at the time, I thought it was the most exciting job I've ever had, until it was taking a mental and emotional and physical toll on me. And yes, you kind of had to play the game every single day. And I don't think you realize what sort of toll it takes on somebody. Always constantly being in that fight or flight mode, and constantly being in the fight mode to just stay relevant and stay in the right place and stay at the right position. So
yeah. So what happened after the 7 years?
There was a moment that basically ties into all of that. I'd met somebody, I was in New South Wales, and I'd met the love of my life. And I rang up my boss and I said, I've met a girl, I've fallen in love, I'm quitting radio. And my boss at the time said, hang on there, mate. He'd heard this all before from young guys. They'd met somebody and they were going to leave radio and move back home. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to leave radio and move back to Melbourne. And he said, just hang on, just don't get ahead of yourself. I'll call you back tomorrow. And I went, okay. Got a phone call the next day, and he said, I got you a job in Melbourne. The same job that you have there in New South Wales, it's waiting for you down here in Melbourne. And I said, what do you mean? I said, how did you just recreate the job I have in New South Wales back down there in Melbourne? And he goes, well, somebody had that job and now they don't have that job anymore.
No.
Now it's yours. And at the time I said, great. But for some reason, and I'm glad it did, but at the time I knew that was terrible. I didn't recognize it was awful because of the environment that I was in, but it weighed on me because I started to think about that person who was just going about their business, doing their job, probably loving their job, and then just getting a tap on the shoulder because for some reason I was slightly more valuable to the organization than they were. And that just weighed down on me how easy it was to not be valuable anymore, to lose your job in the blink of an eye. And it weighed on me that one little phone call from me had completely altered the course of somebody else's, work life. And I have no idea how it affected them. I don't know what happened to them after that. And I accepted that job. And I think after I accepted that job, I just started to think about where I was at, what I was doing, what sort of person I was turning into. And shortly afterwards, maybe about 6 to 8 weeks after that, I knew I'd done. I remember I went to the bosses and I said, I'm leaving, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I don't like the person that I've turned into. And they couldn't understand because they're so ingrained in radio. And they're like, what do you mean you're leaving radio? Why would you leave? Well, no one leaves. You either get fired or you stay. No one leaves. And I was like, no, I'm done. I don't want to do radio anymore. I hate who I've turned into. I hate the cutthroat nature of it. I don't enjoy it anymore. And they even up to my last day, they were convinced I was just going somewhere else, going to a competitor. I even had a moment where an individual came up to me and offered me $10,000 in cash to stay at the radio station and not go to another radio station and work there. And I was like, I don't want any of this anymore. This is exactly what I'm talking about. I don't need any of it in my life. For me to pass all of the opportunities that kept on coming my way as I tried to leave, like it was even harder to leave the more I sort of tried to get out of it. But I'm glad I did, because I think at that time I don't know what sort of person I would have turned into in the end, because you're not thinking about everybody else. You're thinking about purely yourself. So yeah, vowed never to do radio again, and then spent the next 7 years back working with Dad. I think I came home from quitting radio, and I think Dad famously again said, well, you're not sitting on the couch at home, you're coming to work with me. So I started working with Dad again as a builder renovator, and that for 7 years. So yeah.
It seems like there's a lot of sevens going on here.
There is a bit, isn't there?
How long have you been Brekkie host at Light?
Well, the Brekkie host, I think this is a good thing because I'm terrible at dates and I'm terrible.
7, that's all.
Yeah, I think it's about 12 now.
It's a long time, yeah.
It's well over a decade that I've been there. And that came at a weird place as well, because I was working with Dad and the global financial crisis had hit and the bottom fell out of the building trade.
Yeah.
And Dad would have continued to pay me, I'm sure, at the detriment of Mum and Dad, but I could see with the writing on the wall and there was no workaround, and I didn't want to be that son that just was drawing finances out of their own parents just to have a job. So I went on and did my own thing in the building trade. And then sure enough, famously, I've said this story before, but there's a man working at a particular community radio station called 89.9 Light FM at the time. And his name was Luke Holt. And If you've never heard of Luke or never met him, he has a large heart, and he's an amazing man of love and compassion for people, and he wants to see people, just be the best version of themselves. But he's also very, very blunt when he wants to be, which works well for me because I like to get information between the eyes. And he rang me out of the blue one day and said, "Look, I've been talking to the pastor of your church because I started going to church, and the pastor was involved with that particular radio station, 89.9, The Light." And he said, "Look, I know you used to do radio. I'm wondering if you're interested in doing radio again." And I said, "No, I've got no interest. I've come out of commercial radio. It was exhausting. I was burned out at the end. I vowed never to go back. Thanks for thinking of me, but you guys are fine without me." And then I didn't hear from him again. He called back about a year later and he said, "Hey, remember me? I called you that other time about maybe working at The Light. I thought maybe I'd see how you were, where you were at." And I was like, "Thanks, man. Thanks so much. Look, I'm not interested at all. It's the last thing I want to do is radio ever again. I really have some issues with radio in general and the way it operates." He's like, "Okay, fine." And then a third time, probably a year later, he rang up again. He goes, "Hey, mate, it's Luke again." And he said, I'm just ringing anyone that's ever said no to me, and you're on my list of people that said no to me. I said, "You got to stop calling me, because if I haven't done radio for 7 years, I don't want to do radio. And if I'm the guy on your list, if I'm the best option you have, then you're in a lot of trouble, because I don't do anything to do with radio." So we had a dinner, and I said, "We'll have dinner, we'll get together, we'll talk, we'll find somebody for you so you can stop bothering me." But during the course of that dinner, we talked, and there was a moment that he laid it all out for me. And as I said, he can be a very blunt man when he wants to, which I appreciate. And he said to me, he said, "Look, Kel," he said, "what I'm offering you here at 89.9 The Light, right now, what I'm offering you, it's rubbish hours, it's rubbish pay, but if you jump on board, you might be able to do something good for once with radio." And it was the first time I remember feeling this is the first time anyone has ever said something really bluntly honest to me about where a situation is at. And it just blindsided me, because I was so used in radio, you're spinning it up a bit, you're putting some mayo on it, you're trying to sell the best idea to get the person over the line. But he was just right between the eyes. He said, "This is exactly what it is. Yeah. But we'd love to have you on board because we think together we can do something." And I was sold, and I started work at Light. And as you said, I haven't left in over a decade.
And so how did you end up in breakfast radio then? Because, breakfast is the prime time, the main driver.
It is a big show. And I did nights for a while. And then there was a drive show on at The Light, and the male host, one of the greats, Mr. Leroy Brown, was moving on at the time. So I was lucky enough to get his seat at the table. And then I did a drive show with a delightful individual, Cassie, for about 4 years doing drive, which I enjoyed immensely. And then Cassie moved on in her life. And then I did another drive show for about a year, which wasn't as successful. So that I enjoyed it. I'm not sure if anyone listening enjoyed it. So that didn't last for very long. And then I was at a crossroads at that time. I was like, I kind of done my time at nights. The drive show had run its course. The second attempt had run its course. I'd kind of been not fired, but kind of my shows had wrapped up. And then at that moment, an opportunity came for me to work in breakfast with Lucy, who'd been working with a guy called Ken, and Ken was moving back up to Queensland. And at the time, I'm not sure if the powers that be were sure, because the content team is quite a robust, jovial team behind the scenes. And I think they thought maybe that's not what we want on the air, doing breakfast radio on The Light, because it probably would sound a bit more commercial radio. It probably would be a bit loose and be a bit more jovial. And I think they just thought, look, these two guys are great off air, but it's probably not. It's probably going to be too hard to control on air. And we convinced them otherwise. We put some demo tapes together. We played them the tapes. We said, look, we really think we can do something here. And they said, look, we'll give it a crack. And then, sure enough, 8 or 9 or 10 years later, we're still doing it, and it seems to be working.
Well, I think you've broken the 7-year curse. So
we are. Well, Lucy definitely is the longest on-air personality in the same spot. She stayed in breakfast from Woe to Go. I had to sort of dance around a bit. But I think as far as a team, we're probably the longest running breakfast radio team at 89.9 Alive, which I'm very honoured and privileged to be a part of. I'm very lucky that they allow me to get up every morning and they allow me to speak into the microphone out to the hundreds of thousands of people that tune in every day just to listen to this guy. And I've got no qualifications. I'm not some sort of guru. I don't know how life works, but the one thing we want to do with our Brekkie show is make sure. My big thing is anyone listening to Lucy and Kel for breakfast, if they walk away feeling a little bit more connected, then we've done our job. I really have a heart for people who feel like they're going through life on their own. And this is as much guys as women as well. But if someone can listen to our show and go, that's exactly the situation I'm going through. I thought it was just me. I thought I was the only one that was completely stuffed up my finances, or I thought I was the only one that had lost a family member to that particular disease, or I thought I was the only one going through a messy divorce, or I thought I was the only one that has been unemployed for the last 6 months. When they connect with us because we have the stories or we have the conversations that we do, if they walk away going, I'm not alone, especially in the year that we've had, 2020, as much as we have communicated via screens, I mean, there's so much disconnection out there. I think one of the biggest dangers is, isolation, I think, is one of the biggest dangers in society at the moment. And for somebody to feel connected to somebody else that they may never meet, but they've heard their story, that's my biggest push anyway for what we do on the show.
Yeah. No, I love that because that's why we do our podcast too. It's, and obviously we're specific for men, but, a lot of women listen in as well. But it's more about every one of us sharing our own stories and being able to encourage other people to say, look, hey, we can get through this together,
And I find even with you, Colin, because obviously I've been working with you for a couple of months now, seriously. I famously turned up to Colin's establishment about 2 years ago, did one session and never came back. So, but what I love about people, especially guys sharing their story, is that a lot of guys just see Colin from the pit or Raf or myself, and they paint a picture of, well, I see Colin, he's got a gym, I know who this guy is. But you don't know who this guy is because there's so many different levels to you and to Raf and to anybody. Any guy out there has more than just what you see. But I think a lot of times guys just are either just not able to communicate who they are and the experiences that they've had, or just don't know how to. Just physically don't have the roadmap to actually communicate a story about how they feel.
Or don't have the ability to allow someone in. How amazing that 12 years ago Luke persisted with you year after year and then sat you down and said what he said to you. But was that one of the first times in life when you made the choice to walk away from school, you made the choice to go to Queensland, you made your own choices, but this is one of the times when someone is almost forcing your hand to make a choice that you didn't even think was on your radar at that time?
I think especially in Luke's case, I think Luke reads people really well. And I think a lot of us have these mechanisms up, these defense mechanisms. I know I do, that you basically, you have a way about you. I'm very self-deprecating. I'm happy to throw a joke out and sort of diffuse the situation. Luke is an individual, and he'll love getting all this airtime. Luke is an individual that can go very jovial and then straight into what the problem is, what the issue is. Let's talk about that. Let's not be grey about it. Let's be black and white. And I think for me that was I respond to that. I get very frustrated sometimes where I work for positive radio. I work for positive media, but sometimes you need a bit of reality, and especially guys, I think, because guys will walk around a lot, and I know I did this a lot. I've had counsellors for many reasons throughout my life, and I'm seeing a counsellor right now. But the one thing is that guys find ways not to be emotional because that's just the way they've been taught. They have mechanisms in place not to show emotion, not to connect with emotion. And sometimes it takes somebody to say, and I've found this in conversations that I've had, that sometimes if a guy says, "How you going, mate?" And you go, "Oh yeah, fine." You need somebody in life to go, "You're not fine." And even something like that will sometimes derail a guy or derail a person for a second, and just they'll realize, actually, you're right. Actually, I'm going to speak to you for the next 3 hours about how unfine I actually am because you've just given me this little window of opportunity. And I mean, I see it happen at Collins all the time. The guy that I know you know well, Raf, he's the best listener. He just nods. And people just speak, and they speak, and they speak, and everything comes out, and he's just like, "Yep." And I think sometimes that's the other thing. A lot of guys don't take time just to listen to each other. There's a lot of, yep, she's right, yeah. You talk sport, you talk weather, you talk work, but you'd never find places even like this, like getting someone to sit down and watch something like this with 4 guys talking about stuff. I mean, it's hard for some guys because they're just not programmed to do it. I mean, it's getting better. Every generation, it gets a bit better. I look at my kids, especially my boys, and they're already way more emotionally connected and way more emotionally mature than I was back then, or maybe will ever be as a grown-up. So there's hope on the horizon. But I think a lot of us guys at this age, we may have just missed the boat a little bit, and we need to start teaching ourselves how to just open up and be okay with not being okay.
Yeah. And it's hard to foster those relationships too. They're not easy relationships. You don't stand next to someone at a bar if you're a drinker, or at a cafe getting a coffee and start opening up. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of quantity and quality time and that's the thing that guys have, generally speaking, I'm generalizing, that's the thing that guys are not good at. We like to stay busy. We like to keep, earning the money and bringing home the finance for the family and all that. But when it comes to just stopping and relaxing and just having a drink with a mate, that's the tough stuff.
And that's the thing, isn't it? Because normally because we're, again, I don't want to generalize, you're right, but a lot of us are task orientated. So more often than not, asking somebody, are they okay? It's just going to add to your problems because you know you're not okay.
True.
You know you've got your own problems, and the last thing you want is to have to deal with somebody else's problems when you could be just lying on the couch watching football.
So we say, "Are you okay?" And in our head, going, "Please say yes."
Please say you're fine. Please say you're fine.
But that is very true. That I hadn't thought of that. That is accurate. That you don't want to stop and talk.
Yeah, and which would lead me back to one of the things that I'm huge for is talking to somebody, so you sort your stuff out, so you can maybe listen to other people's stuff. Because if you've got a list of things that you haven't sorted out, it is tough to listen to other people's problems. Yeah. Because one, you probably don't have space for their problems, and two, you're probably comparing your problems to theirs secretly anyway.
Yeah. So how do you do it then, Kel? Because Brekkie Radio, I'm guessing Brekkie Radio, you get up like stupid o'clock. It must be 4, 5.
Yeah, it's usually about it's definitely before. The only animal that's up when I'm up is a sparrow. Sparrows are up.
So how do you do it? You've got early mornings. You obviously would go to bed early because if you're getting up at 4 or 5, it's pretty hard to stay up late. How do you foster these relationships? How do you build these times when you get to relax and hang out?
Well, spoilers. This is one of my issues. This is one of my growth areas, as people like to say. I have very, very few friends. I have very few people that are my age and of my gender. And I talk about sorting. I've had a lot of stuff to sort out in my life. And the counsellor I'm seeing right now, she is amazing. And she has pinpointed that, Kel, you really have no social network of men your age that you're hanging out with and talking about life. I'm very good at talking on the radio. I'm really good at talking to people about what they're going through, but I have no one in my life that I really have around me that I can talk to. So it's a real struggle for me as well. It's weird for people because some people, they say, "Oh, Kel, he's on the radio," and they hear Kel on the radio, but when they meet Kel, I'm a very different person. I'm not. I think what people have said in the past is I'm an introverted extrovert. So
Right.
On the radio, hey everyone, it's a Tuesday morning. How great's Tuesday? Oh, I can't wait for it. But when you meet me in real life, I'm like, hey, how you going? And a lot of people will walk away going, what is wrong with Kel? But if I was like, I'd have to have Colin's job to be like, hey, come on, let's lift another weight, let's go. Like, some people have that personality, but I don't.
Yeah.
When I'm
so
on the radio.
is that hard then? Because I'm guessing Light would have hundreds of thousands of listeners, right? Let's just, even if it had 10,000, there's 10,000 people that know you, that you can walk down the street, they know your voice, they pick you, hang on a minute. Mm-hmm. So there's tens of thousands of people that know Kel, but yet what you're saying is that they don't really know you. So many know you, but you don't know them.
Yeah,
is that hard?
I'm a really private person behind the scenes, and I think it is hard for me to connect. I think part of it, and not to turn this into a counselling session, but I did focus a lot in my youth on friends. It was friends. I had a core group of mates who I lived and died for. Yeah. And I think through counselling and through unpacking a lot of stuff, for me, that took me on a path that was a bit self-indulgent and a bit me, and not about everybody else. And I feel like in my later life, I've kind of reacted against that. So I've been so core with friends, and I had 4 friends who I knew intimately growing up. Like I knew everything about them. I knew what their life was like at home with their families. I knew all the troubles they were having with girlfriends or stuff that was going on at work. And then, as I said, growing up and being a bit of a person that was indulging in drink and stuff like that, there was a moment in my life at about the age of 21, 22 when I stopped all that, because I saw where it was taking me. I saw it taking me down a path and it was a realization. A very quick story. We used to have weekends together. We used to drink quite heavily. And the problem with alcohol is it makes you think that you're really cool and that you're just suave and you're a communicator and you're the life of the party. A friend took a video of the group of us, and I saw what I was like, and I was a mess. I was embarrassing. In my head, the alcohol had told me I'm the life of the party. Everyone loves me. Seeing reality of what I actually was, it was quite humiliating. And so in the space of a couple of weeks, I went cold turkey on everything that I was doing. And I think I've gone so cold turkey that I dropped all my friends and I dropped all that lifestyle. And now I'm out in this space where I'm holding down a job. I'm a fully functioning adult, but I don't have a huge group of people that I can turn to talk about my emotions. The counsellor is probably the one that I talk to most about how I'm dealing with things. Because, and I don't know, because I don't have these large sort of groups of guys I can talk to, I don't know if this is a thing that's happening with a lot of guys out there. Like, I don't know about you guys, whether you've got like a core group of people you hang out with that are going through issues that you're going through, but it's definitely an area in my life that I need to work on.
I think it's evolved. I think it's something that evolves personally. Like, you had your friends for what you were going through back then, but when you changed your ways, though, that friendship group became not irrelevant. Friendship you didn't want to be a part of, and now you've evolved into this different being. And you know, Mosh, I'm guessing, Mosh, you would have had friends as a chippy that are different to your friends now. You've changed. You're not a chippy anymore. It doesn't mean you're better or worse than what you were. You're just different. And so when we reach a different stage in life, this is my opinion anyway, you know, basically we find new friends because we're doing new things in new ways.
And I think
so that's exciting for you, Kel.
And I think guys also have this mentality, and I know I do. I might not see one of my mates for 6 months, and then we catch up exactly where we left off.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's sort of like with you, Raph, you know, we hang out every now and again. I mean, we've seen each other a lot more these days, but you know, we might not have seen each other for 6 months, and it's like, hey, Raph, how you going? What's new? You know, maybe we don't get any depth, but, you know, I think that can be a mentality of guys to not. I think females tend to be a lot more on a weekly basis and a continual catch up and a continual, this is what's going on in my life. And guys, I think, hold back a little bit more, and you know, from my experience. And
we talked about this on the radio about a month or so ago, and we established that if you go to any playgrounds in your local area,
so true,
you go to a playground and there will be women at the playground, complete and utter strangers. But if their kids are playing together,
That's so true.
but you'll look at guys at the playground and dads will be like this.
On their phones. The kid's falling over. What?
Yeah.
I didn't see it.
And I'm not saying it's for everyone, but very rarely do you get two adult males at a playground with kids going off doing their own thing that have that impulse to go, I'll go and talk to that guy and find out who he is.
Yeah.
It's just that barrier. Now, like I said, I'm not an expert, so I don't know if it's been built into us, the way we evolved growing up, whether it was our dad's influence on us. Because, I mean, most of our dads came out of a generation where you don't talk about anything. You don't really show emotion. You very rarely get a hug. And I love my dad. My dad was one of the great dads. I had a really great childhood growing up, but my dad was that generation. He'd go out, he'd work all day, he'd come home. He was the provider and mum was the emotional support most of the time.
Yeah.
And so we don't learn, I guess we don't. And this is what I'm trying to do with my kids is I'm trying to hug my boys as often as I possibly can. And not just for them, for me as well, because I got to learn as a dad that I got to keep that contact. I got to keep that. I don't have to sit them down all the time and go, hey, let's talk about our feelings, but I got to show them that I have feelings and that they can access those feelings if they need, to have a conversation every now and then, or if they just need a hug. I think a lot of guys need that in their life.
And I think, like, last year, I know you opened up on radio, and this is leading to the next topic.
I got very emotional speaking about being emotional.
Yeah, tell us about how that happened and how that came about and what it was related to.
Oh, you just have a cry on the radio, Colin, and everyone thinks you're amazing. Oh, that guy.
Actually, I read something and it said Cal opened up and broke down on air, and everyone just fell in love with him. And I'm
the most amount of listens or hits or something. And poor Lucy,
everyone was already in love with you.
Poor Lucy cries almost every week, and it's just everyone goes. I cry once a year, and everyone loses their mind. I had and Colin to be aware of this because he's helping me on my journey back to a fully functioning adult male. But I had some pretty. I've had a suspect back for quite some time, and it's only recently that I found out what's actually been wrong with my back. But like a true man, years and years ago, it's probably 8 or 9 years I've had back issues. And of course, like a man, I haven't really done much about it. I've just soldiered on, thinking that it'll come good at some point. But things that used to come good when you're 21, 22 don't necessarily come good when you're 44.
and let's be honest about this. This has sent you into hospital, and it's not.
Not
like my back's.
There's been a couple of occasions where my back has frozen, so it's spasmed up, and my whole spine. It's like lightning going through my spine. It's happened 2 or 3 times, and completely immobile and can't move, and even breathing will set it off while I'm lying on the floor in the hallway. And the most recent occasion that happened about a year or 2 ago, I was on the floor at my mum and dad's. It went at my mum and dad's, and I was on the floor for about 6 hours because, rightly so, you ring up the ambulance and say, I need to be taken to emergency. And they say, well, we have this car accident victim here that we've got to get to first. So take a couple of Panadol and see what you can do. But after 6 hours, when you can't move, because every time you move a little bit, it's like a lightning bolt going through your body. It got a bit much, and the ambulance ended up coming and took me to emergency. And I've been taken to emergency about 3 different occasions. And I've tried to figure out what's been going wrong in my life. But there was a moment about a year or so ago where I'd been in pain every day. And again, being a man, I didn't really process that. And then when you start talking about it, things start to fire off inside you, and you start to realize it's all coming out. And I started to talk on the radio about how I'd been in pain for many years of my life, and I've just gone through it. And I was always worried. I had such a fear of my back going. I felt like I was made of glass, and I couldn't bend over and pick up anything. I couldn't do any exercise. There would be days where I would just want to stay in bed and not get out of bed because I knew that it was another day where I had to feel some sort of pain in my back. And it just wears you down. Constant physical pain wears you down, but it doesn't just wear you down physically. It ends up wearing you down mentally as well. You just have no fun, and it just sucks the fun out of everything in life. So on the radio, I started to talk about it, and of course, I got a bit emotional about it. But subsequently, guys listening in, and yes, I have a radio station. Yes, I had a microphone, but I talked about how I was feeling. I talked about how messed up I was. And sure enough, an amazing chiropractor got in touch with me. And he said, I know what's wrong. He said, you've been searching for an answer. And I said, I can pretty much predict what's wrong with you. And no one's figured it out. And I know the answer. And I went, sure you do, bud. And I said, but I went and saw him. And he took an X-ray.
Over the phone.
Yeah, I think his wife had heard me on the radio crying. And she said, you could fix him. Phil's in trouble. You could fix him. And this delightful guy said, okay, I'll give it a crack. So he came in on a Saturday. Talk about guys that are passionate about what they do and willing to help other people. This guy came in on a Saturday and spent 2 hours with me taking X-rays. And before he took the X-rays, he says, I think you've broken your coccyx bone at some point in your life, and it hasn't healed properly. And he said, I think that's what's giving you all these spasms and all this problem. And sure enough, he took an X-ray, and my coccyx, I've learned a lot about coccyxes. They're like rings of a tree. So when you're growing up as a guy or a girl, it's full of bones. And over the formative years, as you're growing up, young kid into a teenager, the bones start to fuse together into one big bone. And he said, somewhere about year 8, you broke your coccyx. And you never knew it, and you didn't get it fixed, and you didn't go and see it. And I could, as soon as he said that, like a lightning bolt, I remember falling down a flight of stairs in year 8, and I slipped off the top of the concrete steps, and I fell onto my backside, right onto my backside, onto the bone. About 6 flights of steps, just midair, bang. And I was a teenage kid, so I was in pain for about a week, and then it went away. And you could see that the coccyx is supposed to be a rounded thing, and mine sort of jackknifes a bit. In year 8, the bone that was supposed to fuse at that age didn't fuse properly, and now that's been putting pressure on everything else that's going on in my body. So none of that would have happened if I didn't stop and talk honestly about how I felt and what being in pain every day of my life for a few years had put me through. And just the simple fact of opening up and being vulnerable, I made a connection with another guy who said, I can help. I hear you. Don't worry about crying. Don't worry about being vulnerable. We can actually do something about this if you just listen to what I have to say. Subsequently, the same with Colin. Then I come back to Colin because I was dealing with this man, and I said, can I start going to gym again? Because I haven't been to gym for years because I've been too afraid. So I'm feeling like I'd snap in half if I lifted a weight. And he said, not yet, not yet, not yet. Now go. And I've been with Colin for the last couple of weeks, if not months, and Colin's been very gentle. He's got a lot of guys doing all these heavy weights, and I'm there doing my stretches and my resistance training, but Colin's taken me on a journey now. And as I said, we talk about this, Colin, that you're helping me lifting a weight at the pit mentally does so much more for me because I can do it and I don't break down. I can lift something and I don't snap in half. But without talking about how I was feeling, I would still be back at home in pain every day of my life, or wanting to just stay in bed all day, or not wanting to deal with another day of worrying about my back going. It was literally the physical pain was adding to the mental stress. The mental stress was adding to the physical pain. It's just a vicious circle that if you don't talk about it, if you don't break the cycle by just telling somebody that you're not right, that you're not handling this. And this is what we do as guys. I never felt so useless. When my back went, I was usually out for about 2 weeks, and I'd be flat on my back in bed. It's the worst thing because you're flat on your back in bed and all you've got is yourself. And I felt so useless. I felt like a failure as a dad. I felt like a failure as a person. I thought I was letting everyone down at work. You're just such a mess. You're so used to just going, ticking all these boxes, fulfilling your job, fulfilling your role as a father. And then all of a sudden you can't do any of that. And then you start reassessing who you actually are. There's so much that goes on if you just stop and think about where you're at in life. And if you're not okay, tell somebody. And then you end up...
It must have transformed your life then to not have the pain, but not have the burden of worrying about, maybe it's too early, of it collapsing again kind of thing. Like I don't quite understand it at this moment because I'd convinced myself with no help, with just me doing it,
with just me trying to get through every day in pain and miserable, I'd convinced myself it was never going to get better until I went and saw my chiropractor that came out of the blue, and he said, it will if you do this. And then I went and saw Colin, and I'll ask Colin every time we're doing an exercise, I'm going like, what's this doing? Is this doing something to my spine? And he goes, that's nowhere near your spine, Kel. That's your elbows.
You're literally doing a chest press.
But the old, like the fear is there, and then Colin goes, "No, mate, you're fine. And you got to trust. I got to put my trust in Colin. I got to put my trust in other people, which is also hard for guys to do sometimes because you're vulnerable. You're telling somebody else, I'm not great at this. I actually suck at this. I'm not perfect. I don't have it all under control. And as guys, I think we all want to have it under control. And let's be honest, gentlemen, most everything is out of control. We're just trying to make it up as we go along.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, well, look, we're having so much fun. But
we certainly are.
The time is actually...
I think I'm just rambling on, really.
We've got a question from someone who's watching, and they're saying it's from someone called Lucy. I'm not sure if you know.
Oh, no. Can we block that person? Is there any chance we can?
What is it like to work with a legend?
Does she mean you when I'm training with you at the pit?
I think she meant Leroy Brown from back then.
Oh, no, I work with a lot of legends at 89.9 a lot. And,
I'm assuming she's talking about Aizen, but you know.
Yeah, Aizen, our producer. Well, Aizen trains at the pit as well, and he's a young gun. He's a good-looking rooster too. So.
Oh yes, he is.
He's all over it at the gym. He's going to be an absolute unit coming into summer. Look, no, we love the team at 89.9 a lot. Is a really. They've been the closest thing I've ever had to friends, really. We talked about the fact that I don't really have a huge social network outside of my own kids and my family. But if anyone has seen what Kel is all about, it's the team at Light. And they've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, and they've kept me around. And I think, yeah, if we take away anything from me, it's you just got to try. Against everything in your nature as a man, you got to try and make a connection when you can. Try and listen to someone's story. Try and engage in someone's conversation. Even if you have that feeling of like, I'm exhausted, I've worked all day, I've got no time. I found myself at a dinner party or at a church service, and I'm like, I could just go to the car and go home. Maybe just spend 30 seconds chatting to someone random. You never know where that conversation is going to take you, and it might actually help you more than it helps the other person that you have the conversation with. So. Yeah,
we normally end with asking you for one piece of advice, but I think that's an amazing piece of advice to finish on. Like, because I think sometimes we're either too scared to talk or too scared to listen. You know, or we don't have time. We've always got something else to go to. So I think both that listening and the talking is very important. That's what I've picked up from you.
You never, and I'm good at talking. You heard all I did was talk for the last hour, but that's my job. So, but it can be quite dangerous if all you do is talk. It can be. Well, no one's going to stick around for very long because no one gets to engage in their story, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But I know that listening is a big thing, whether it's in a marriage or whether it's in a family situation. Listening to my kids is huge for me now. I got 2 teenagers, and the one thing they keep coming back to me is that, Dad, grown-ups don't listen to us. The grown-ups just already have a preconceived idea of what we're doing and that we're going to do something wrong or we're going to do something so no one stops to listen. And I think that's what I'm learning as well in me trying to be, I'm by no means the perfect dad, but when it comes to teenagers, especially, I'm learning listening is huge for people. So hopefully people have listened to this at some point and gotten something out of it. But and I'll keep listening to Colin and hopefully never have a back problem ever in my life again.
Absolutely. And I'm going to give you my tip on listening, because I know and Raf is an amazing listener too. You know, over the years I've learned a lot from him. But my tip on listening is that you always ask a second question. So if I say, Cal, how you going today? And you say, yeah, I did this and this. Then you have a follow-up question. to whatever you said.
No.
A lot of times we're preparing what we want to say, rather than listening and saying, "Oh, okay, well, tell me about that." You had a work breakup yesterday. Oh, cool. Oh, tell me about that. What happened? So always have a follow-up question for someone. And it's not a formula. It's just, I think, a good way of listening and engaging with someone so that they feel interested.
People just want to feel. I think we all do. People just want to feel that connection. They want to feel like someone cares. Someone actually. Yeah. Somebody's just not just being polite. Someone's not just having a conversation because you've cornered them at a dinner party.
Yep.
And it's hard for me. It's hard for a lot of people to engage in that empathy. Yep. And I think I see it with you, Colin, and I can sell it. Raph does nothing but listen, and then we'll drop it. But he goes, and Raph's a bit like my counselor, where he'll listen, and then I'll go, I think this is what you're saying, Kel. And then I'm like, that's exactly what I'm saying. Says it better than I do.
Raph is so good like that. Absolutely.
Thanks, guys. I implemented something fun this year because we're all about Zoom, right? So everyone's on a screen. I work for the Department of Education and Training. It's a mammoth beast, like tens of thousands of employees. So we're in a meeting and you might have 50 or you might have 100 or you might have 10. I never hit end meeting ever. And the conversations I've had with, you see the people go from 10 to 8 to 7 to 4, and you just stuck. And I had an amazing conversation yesterday with a guy who's studied politics, has a master's in politics, and like myself, doesn't like Trump a lot, wants to say hate Trump and all that. And we got talking about all this stuff. But I think it's what you're talking about, Kel, is so cool because it's those incidental conversations where people just want to know, oh, you really are interested in what I'm saying. You really are asking questions that make it sound like you really want to know more. And I think that's if there's any year we need it or going into next year, it's now. We need to just stop and just smell the roses, talk to our neighbours that we wouldn't normally talk to, slow down and just ask that follow-up question like Mosh talked about and be genuine about it.
That's a bombshell. That terrifying moment where you don't press the leave button and see what happens.
Yeah. Don't worry. Sometimes I'm left on my own, or sometimes I go, "Hey, how you going?" Oh, thanks for that. And then they ring me back. Did you say something? Yes, I was trying to see how you're going.
I go as quick as I can to find the leave button.
Unless you don't like the person, then it's end. Bye. Sorry, having internet trouble. Bye.
Well, thanks heaps, Cal, for coming on.
Appreciate it, guys. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I think you're both exceptional listeners. I'd like to just, when you do this, is this season 1, season 2, season 12?
One.
Well, when you do season 2, just let me sit in the box at the bottom and I'll have a listen. I'll work on my listening skills.
Oh, that's good. Well, Raph, I like what you're saying about slowing down. I'm going to do a gratuitous plug now. Riley, one of the guys who he listens to the podcast every week, he's got this motivational mindset journal out.
Oh, cool.
He put it out, which it's an amazing thing. Like, it's got all these different, I don't know if you can see there, but it's got a whole lot of things about, just stopping, settling down, and there we go. And you can, go through each day, have a bit of a look, and just calm down and settle yourself a bit, as you're saying. Have a think about things. It's got things about what, your first thoughts in the day, your schedule, gratitude, things you might want to do, notes, things that you've learned, how much water intake, your reflections, all those sort of things in there. So it's called Motivational Mindset Journal. It's just on Instagram. You can have a look at that. But I thought I'd just show everyone that because it's a really good sort of tool to actually help us purposefully slow down, because I know for me, my mind's always go, but sometimes to actually write things down and slow myself down a bit, I think can be really helpful going.
But not only that, take stock. Like, yeah, I drink heaps of water. I drink 8 litres, and then you record it for like 2 weeks and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not even close to 1 a day. I thought I was at 8. When you're taking stock of the thoughts that are coming in, I've done a few of those, and it's scary stuff.
Yep. So no, that's good. But there we go. What a way to finish a year, and what a year it's been.
What a year it's been. Hopefully there will be no more 2020s to come. Hopefully we click over and it's 2021.
Well, we better let you go, Cal. It's your last day on air.
This is so far past my bedtime. I've never been up this late before.
Wow. Probably, I'm sure it is. So last day tomorrow on air?
Last official day. We'll be back for Christmas morning. We love, the Light family loves to get back on the air at Christmas. As we said, Christmas is a great time with family and friends, but it's a pretty average time if you don't have family and you don't have friends. So we love to be there for our family that listen in, and a lot of people tuning in at Christmas time to 89.9 The Light just to have a bit of conversation. Lucy and I aren't doing anything other than mucking around and cracking some bonbons and eating too much pudding. Playing some Christmas carols and things like that. So if you are finding yourself a bit, again, with all the restrictions, I know they're easing, but it is still tough to get around the place. If you find yourself a bit lonely on Christmas Day, you can always switch on to The Light, and switch on to The Light any time of the day. And there'll always be somebody on there wanting to have a conversation about how you're feeling.
Yeah, good on you.
Absolutely. And if you need some fitness advice every Monday morning, we hang out about 7:45.
This man is actually, and I don't normally say this, but he is actually changing me into a different person, which is, at my age, I never thought that could happen. So highly recommend, if you have one of two things next year, have an hour with a counsellor and let them ask you, have an hour with friends and family, but sometimes they're a bit biased and sometimes they've got agendas. If you can get a professional to ask you how you're going, see what comes out in that first hour, and then spend an hour with a personal trainer and see what happens after that.
Yeah.
I'm doing the first part, not doing the second part. I had my second. Well, I've been meeting with my psychologist for about 7 years on and off, but today I had another session, and mate, I've got to tell you, I was a mess at about 9 to 10, and then I clicked on at 10:15, and I feel so much lighter because he just says stuff that is like, oh my gosh, why did I not think of that? But I guess I pay $170 for him to think of it, so it's nice.
Yeah, that's right. But they normally, and if they're a professional, they'll have something that will just click with you. And it might not click in the first session, but you never know. If you just keep talking and keep communicating and keep doing some sit-ups, you might find yourself in a completely different place at the end of 2021.
Absolutely.
Brilliant.
All right. Well, for everyone listening, it's time to wrap it up, and I hope you all have a great Christmas, and we'll be back in the new year, I'm sure, Rafi. And, we might have to find some people equal to the caliber of Cal, but,
That's going to be hard.
Won't be hard.
I'm sure it will be. It's been great, and we'll put it on, this will be on Spotify later on tonight, so.
Yep, if you just search EmpowerMEN, it comes up now, so.
Cool.
Appreciate it, boys.
Thank you.
Talk soon.
Catch you later, guys. Merry Christmas.
See you.